Welcome to How We Belong, the podcast where we explore the question, what does it mean to belong in today's modern world? I'm your host, Kylie Hodges, and today's episode is all about grief. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a warning before I bring in today's guest. If you're in a fragile place, if you're feeling a little tender today, if you're someone who maybe you're just not ready to talk about the conversation grief, pause this episode, go on to the next one, or hold this one for later. I just want to give you a warning. Take care of yourself. And I actually found it to be very helpful and uplifting. And for those of you who are ready to tackle this topic, I hope that you do too. So without further ado, let's get into it. Maryann Udel is a best-selling author, speaker, and certified life and business coach experienced in managing loss. She guides individuals and businesses through major transitions. She was unexpectedly introduced to the world of grief at the age of 24 when her husband died in an automobile accident. Over the years, she found a way to live, laugh, love, find joy, and thrive. Through her company, Sheltering Tree, she offers one-on-one support, group programs, retreats, and workshops on various topics related to change, loss, and grief. Whether it's working with individuals or businesses dealing with death, an illness, a divorce, a breakup, or job loss, she helps them make peace with the past so that they can embrace the promise of their future. In the anthology book, Unleashing Your Soul Level Magic, she shares about her journey in the chapter From Grief to Purpose. Welcome, today's guest, Maryann Udel.
Hi, Kylie.
Hi, Maryann. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love to share how I know all my guests with everybody. And you and I actually met years ago through the company that we happen to both be certified through, Creative Successful Entrepreneurs. And my most vivid, earliest memory with you, Maryann, was when I was crying behind a dumpster and you were consoling me. And for context of why I was crying behind a dumpster, I was at a retreat that Maryann was helping lead, and I was waking up to the reality of that the business I thought I had started wasn't working out.
Mhm.
And Maryann, I don't know if you got sent to me or I just found my way to you, but honestly, now that I've worked with you at events like that, I know we send the criers to Maryann because Maryann knows how to not just console, but to keep people on track with, okay, you're in this place and now what? And it sounds to me, based on your intro, that that's exactly what your expertise is. Is that a safe assumption?
Well, that's kind of my superpower. I think that when people meet me, they have an inherent trust. They
Yeah.
know that I will listen without trying to fix.
Yeah.
And when somebody is dealing with grief, that's probably one of the most important things. To have someone acknowledge your grief without trying to platitude it away,
Hmm.
try and make you feel better by saying, oh, it's for the best, or you'll meet somebody new, or you'll get another job, or he was a bum anyway, if you're going through a divorce or something. It's just, tell me how you feel
Yeah.
and why you're feeling that way. And
And then,
once people get that release out, there is a sigh of relief. That doesn't mean it's the end of it, but at least your pain gets acknowledged. You know,
what is the why this might be a stupid question, but why is it so important that the pain is acknowledged?
because it's part of who you are as a human being. If you try to ignore the pain or push it down, bury it, try to keep yourself busy or mask it in some way with the drugs or drink or alcohol or busyness or shopping or uh, working out, it doesn't really go away. It
Hmm.
stays inside your body. So if you don't let the feelings out, they will come up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first clients I had approached me at a networking meeting. She said, I think I need to work with you. I'm crying all the time. It turns out her father had died when she was 13. everyone was worried about her mother, raising two small children during World War II. And she had to be strong for her mom. She had to help take care of her little brother. She couldn't go
Mm.
to the funeral. She couldn't even cry. She was told to be brave. And 50 years later, she was crying all the time. So
Wow.
after we worked together for about a year, she was able to find her joy. And she smiles a lot right now. And she's finding ways to honor her father. She wanted to learn to play the piano, so she bought herself a keyboard. She realized she doesn't need to learn how to play the piano. She just needs to have it to pick out some notes and feel closer to her dad. So that's a very, I don't think I've worked with anybody else who had that long a period of time, but the stuff did not go away. And another client was having medical issues.
Mm.
She never spoke her truth. There were a number of things that happened when she was younger, and she developed stomach issues. She got bronchitis all the time because she wasn't speaking up. And she had jaw problems because of the anger. So there was a lot. And once she started addressing the symptoms of the medical issues and also started talking more about the events that actually happened and letting those feelings out, she was able to ease the pain. So she still had to do the medical stuff,
Mhm.
but it would have kept coming back if she had not addressed the feeling part of it.
I think there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it sounds to me like the importance of speaking out what you're feeling or having your grief acknowledged is a way to release the pressure of what's happening under the surface here
Right,
within our bodies.
right. So you can think of it like a pressure cooker or a volcano, or the incidences where when the term going postal started, that was
Mm.
an angry postal worker that got fired. So all of those emotions of and anger and frustration and everything else came out in that way.
Mm.
And there was mental instability as there as well. But um, I mean, there can be drug addicts that are using that to mask whatever pain they were feeling. You know,
Mhm.
it's yeah. So yes, you're right. The pressure builds up, and if you don't take the lid, if you don't ease the steam in a pressure cooker, it'll explode.
Yeah. So, Marianne, in your intro, you shared that you lost your first husband when you were just 24.
Mhm.
What did you do when you were first going through the initial waves of grief?
Um, a lot of crying. I stayed with my in-laws for about a month, and my mom stayed with me when I went back to my house. I wandered around a lot. I walked almost every day. Sometimes I got lost because I was just walking to get my body moving. It was foggy. My mother-in-law helped me get a job as a waitress.
Mm.
A new diner was opening up just down the street from where I lived, and I had waitressed during college, so she knew I had that experience, and she wanted to get me out of the house because I was sitting around in my robe in Erie, Pennsylvania, when in the winter. So it was perfect to hibernate.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, the woman I worked the breakfast and lunch shift. She was a career waitress, and she was so full of joy, so full of life. Claire was also a widow. She raised two children by herself, and she was like my angel.
Mm.
She helped to give me advice. She protected me from the workers who came in for breakfast who were trying to make a pass at me, and just showed me that it was possible to live. I left Pennsylvania and decided, well, first I decided that I was going to pursue my acting. I knew that I couldn't stay in Pennsylvania, and I applied for an apprenticeship and went to New Jersey to spend the summer at the New Jersey Shakespeare Festival. There, I met a lot of people who lived in New York, and I eventually got my own apartment in New York. And through the acting classes I took,
Mhm.
and all of the emotional work that you do as an actor, I was able to process a lot of my grief that way without even realizing it. Because this was pre-internet,
Mhm. Mhm.
and any support groups were mostly church related, and everybody was my grandmother's age. There was nobody to relate to,
Yeah.
and I did a lot of journaling, a lot of writing, a lot of processing my feelings through a lot of the acting work that I did. And it's still a work in progress, progress, both, I guess. That every September, I still feel the melancholy,
Mm.
the month that he died. So there is an evolution to grief, and
Mm.
you learn how to live with it. Because whatever it is that happened can't go away. And whatever feelings you had about what happened can change, but it still affected you. Like if you do an x-ray on a broken bone, you can see, even after the bone mends, you can see where there was a breakage. Or if you have to get some surgery, you can see the scars, even very faint scars. I still have a scar from my polio vaccination.
Mhm.
Your mother probably, anybody of my generation will have that as a scar. So
Yep.
there are a lot of physical things that you can see. The emotional ones you can't see, but they do have these scars as well. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Makes absolute sense. So I'm just thinking about like, how does Marianne, the woman who's actively experiencing navigating life through grief, turn to becoming someone who helps other people with grief?
I
How
didn't
did
want.
you formulate that into being an expertise? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was it was actually through the side door.
Mhm.
I was working a corporate job because my current husband was injured and I couldn't continue acting and I needed to get a full-time job. So I did that for 14 years, but there were signs that I would be laid off. I started exploring what else was out there and came upon coaching.
Mhm.
And I thought that I wanted to help people get calm. And then through through some expert coaching, I realized that it was specifically grief. I didn't want anyone else to have to go through what I went through in the searching for answers, in finding help, because I know firsthand how difficult it is to feel alone and lost and scared and not have any answers and just a bunch of church. Um, I am very religious. I'm not trying to badmouth the church, but there is sort of a soothing that happens that doesn't help. I
Mhm.
mean, the platitudes are,
Yeah.
I would say, they made me angry at the time. Sorry, I don't
So
lose.
that's okay. I actually really appreciate hearing that. I mean, I was raised in a Catholic family, and actually, my husband had never come with me to Wisconsin, where I'm from, for a funeral before until just a few months ago, and we've been together over a decade. And I've been to funerals with his family,
Hmm.
who's also Catholic, but they are in West Texas and Mexico. And so I've experienced that even though it's like the same religion, the grieving process is so different
Hmm.
culturally.
Yeah.
Um, and in my neck of the woods in the Midwest, it's a lot of like holding it in. You
Yes.
don't express. You keep
Hmm.
yourself together.
Hmm.
Like stifle. That's the
Right.
word that comes up for me.
Buttoned up.
And yes, even when you are, I think about I lost a cousin who's the same age as me. We were both 21 oh no, he was a year older. I was 21 when he passed away unexpectedly.
Mm.
Um, and I remember like, I don't think at the time that my family members who were most affected by that realized it, but I could see that like their instinct was to not actively grieve, like to like I hate to say perform, but like the actual expression or performance of grieving. I wasn't seeing it in the same way that I have seen it with Omar's family
Mm.
when um I was at a funeral where it was a lot less unexpected. It was a grandparent who passed away rather than a very young person. But yet the grieving was like it really to me because I'd never seen it before. It felt like a performance. People were like throwing themselves over the casket. There was a lot of like
Wow.
wailing and a lot of crying. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm positive that like while culturally it's so different in the way that people express their grief in ceremonial things like funerals, I've often wondered if there's like uh the way Catholicism is baked into my upbringing in the Midwest, which is like German Catholic and
Hmm.
German Irish Catholic, is very different than yeah, for people who are listening. Maryann made a face like, of course, which I absolutely agree, which is very different than like Mexican Catholicism, which is what
Right.
Omar was raised in. And it's really, Omar and I have had a lot of discussions about it over the last few months of like, we've both witnessed our parents grieve losing parents recently, and it's so interesting how different it is. And it's not like there's no judgment there, there's no like blaming or anything. It's just I'm just so curious about how much is it this is just their personal flavor in expressing grief, and how much is it the way they were raised or brought up or what they saw when they were younger of how to grieve.
Well, I think it's all of that,
Hmm.
that the culture has a big thing to do with it. And then
Yeah.
there's also whatever the relationship was with the parent
Yeah.
or whoever it is that may have died.
Hmm.
And even in a family where a parent dies and there's many siblings, every one of the siblings is going to have a different way to express their grief.
Hmm.
Everybody, every individual that you meet has a different way of expressing their grief, of going through it, expressing it, and also experiencing it. There's no hard and fast rules on how your grief will proceed. There's no
Hmm.
checklist. The five stages are not for the grievers. Those five stages that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote related to her experience of observing people who were dying. Those were
Mm.
stages that they went through. And somehow they got grabbed up, and people interpreted that that's how you're supposed to experience grief after somebody dies. That's not it at all. You can use those as indicators of things you might feel, but there's no order. You can be feeling more than one thing at a time, and you can start the day feeling at peace, and then you could feel devastated in the afternoon, or vice versa. So anger in the middle at lunchtime. I don't know. So,
Yeah, yeah. So that is so fascinating. I've heard of the 5 stages of grief, and I've never actually heard what you said around it. Do you, off the top of your head, remember what those 5 stages are?
no, because I don't really like to refer to them, to be honest.
Yeah,
But if you want
that's
to,
fascinating, though. That's okay.
um,
So,
yeah.
what would you say then if the common people have heard there's 5 stages of grief, and you're saying that's actually not a accurate way to look at it? How do you help? Is there a process? Are there stages of grief from what you've seen and how you work with people?
Well, I think that the initial part of grief is both physical and mental and emotional, because there are physiological things that happen, and brain fog is real. um, Not being able to think clearly, feeling tired all the time, and not really wanting to eat, but it's not the same for everybody.
Mhm.
So it's really difficult to say, if you don't feel like this, don't worry, it'll happen tomorrow. However you're feeling your grief is the way you're feeling it, however you're going through it. What I The way I guide my clients, the first thing I ask them, how are you feeling today and why? Once you get more in touch with your feelings and your emotions, then you can make more sense out of what it is you're processing. That if you wake up and you're angry, oh, I feel angry today. Why do I feel angry? Oh, I had that argument yesterday, or something reminded me of something, or I feel particularly sad because I heard that song, or I just got something in the mail that reminded me, oh, I got to do that legal shit. So,
Yeah.
um, I mean, there's just feeling. I think is probably being aware of what you're feeling and letting it out. That's
Mhm.
the thing, because what you were saying about people stifling,
Yeah.
and I think we need to talk more about grief in general,
Mhm.
and that will lift the stigma, lift the taboo. There's some of it is social media, wanting
Mhm.
people to be better, feel better, always be their best,
Mhm.
not wanting to make other people sad, not wanting to be pitied. Um, a lot of those types of experiences are why people don't want to talk about it, because they don't want to appear broken. They don't want to be, oh,
Yeah.
or um, just talk to me like a real person. Talk to me like, yeah, it sucks. I know. I, yes, it sucks and it hurts, and you're allowed to hurt. So let it out. Um,
What do you say to the people who don't know what to say? Like they are the friend of someone who's going through grief.
mhm. Acknowledge that I can't imagine how you're feeling, but I'm here to listen.
Mhm.
If you want if you want someone to sit with you, I'm here. And it's just because there are no words. You can't undo whatever it is that happened.
Something that I think is part of your superpower that is absolutely one of my weaknesses is being able to say something like that or ask a question to someone, "How are you doing today and why?" And then you shut your trap and you just listen. And I think I'm a perfectly fine listener, but I'm not good at restraining my mouth. Like I always want to, and I think some of it is there's like an anxiety of silence makes me uncomfortable.
Mm,
And so I've had to really teach myself in moments where it's not helpful for me to talk, that someone needs me to just be quiet and listen, I have to remind myself it's not about me. My comfort is not the priority here. And if sitting in discomfort in silence is what I think is helpful for my friend or who I'm with, then I need to get comfy with the discomfort.
Mhm. Sometimes, well, if you're going to be with a friend who went through a breakup, a divorce, a death, you can ask them if they want to talk about it.
Mm, mhm.
You can, if someone has died, tell me a story, a happy story about them. What do you remember most about them? Or what did you like most about this person? Or what really pissed you off about them? So you just, they can get that part out, that there's the good and the bad. And whatever it is that they feel like they need to talk about, let them talk about it and just listen. And they might repeat stories, you know.
Mhm.
If you're talking, for a while I was doing phone conversations with this woman who was at 94, 96, and she had short-term memory loss. She told me the same four stories over and over
Mm.
and over every time I called her. And it was listening. So it's just hearing someone's voice, knowing you're not alone and that someone cares.
What do you wish if you could go back and talk to 24-year-old Maryann?
Hmm.
What do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Mm. Don't worry, you'll get better.
Mm.
He had his time with you.
Oh, that's really lovely. I'm getting weepy thinking about that. That's really lovely.
So am I.
Oh, I'm hugging you through Zoom. What do you wish other people knew? Other people going through grief right now. What is one thing that you wish that you could, if someone's listening right now who's navigating grief, what would you like them to hear?
It will get better. Acknowledge it and feel it
Mm, mhm.
and ask for help. Mhm.
It sounds like, the question I want to ask everybody on this podcast is what does it look like to belong in blank scenario?
Mhm.
And it sounds like you can obviously, I want you to answer the question, what does it look like to belong when you're experiencing grief? But it
Mhm.
sounds to me like it's a little bit of finding others who are willing to listen, maybe others who have been through what you've been through, and also hold um holding on to a hopefulness even if it's hard to see it. Like there has to be some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Is that
Well,
accurate?
I think that rather than look at it as hope, I think looking at it as um, possibility or gratitude for the small things, the good things. Um, there is an organization called Option B. Sheryl Sandberg started it
Mhm.
after her husband had died. And Adam Grant advised her to write down three things she was grateful for every day. In the midst, she wanted to figure out how to exist and be whole for her children who were also grieving. She was in bed for days and finding the moments of gratitude helped her. Some days it was, I had a good cup of coffee today, or I took a shower, I got
Mhm.
out of bed. Um, and then she started noticing things during the day. Oh, I can write that in my gratitude journal. So something like that simple starts to shift the energy because you're totally devastated and focused on whatever it is that happened, whatever it is you're grieving, if it's a job loss, of a divorce, or a breakup, or whatever, or a death,
Mhm.
that it's, what do I need to learn? What can I do now? That's how I decided to leave Erie and go to New York. Well, what can I do? And actually, I used to talk to Bob while I was walking all the time.
Mm.
And he was, he said, go to New York, do your acting. So that's why I started looking for the apprentice stuff. It was everything that the life that I had in Pennsylvania was not going to be the same without him.
Mhm.
The life we planned could not be. So, okay, why not do what I thought I was going to do before I met him? And that's what I could do. So that's I followed. You start following the little stones.
Mhm.
Start thinking about, what do I want? What do I want now? What and what is there? What's possible? So in looking for what how we belong in grief, I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement that we're all experiencing grief of something right now.
Mm.
Every person you see has something that they're currently grieving, something that's challenging them, that's causing them pain. It might make you think differently when you're on the freeway and some crazy guy cuts in front of you. I just assume it's a guy. I'm sorry.
It probably
Just
is.
women.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But yes, I know what you mean.
um, or the grumpy boss, or
Mhm.
the customers, the checker at the grocery store. Maybe they're trying to keep their mother in a home, or they have to put their mother in a home, or their kids are acting up, or who knows?
Yeah.
So
I really
everybody
needed
has
to hear
something.
that, Maryann, because um as you know, I a year ago or almost a year ago, my I lost my dog Mocha, and she was an elderly dog. It was time to see her go. Um and then a few months later, I had a miscarriage, which you also know about. And I have a lot of I feel like I talk down my sadness around losing my dog, because sometimes, most times, I feel sadder about that than the miscarriage. And I think it's because I had a longer, deeper, bigger relationship with that dog. And then um there are times where I talk it down to myself, like, well, it's not a person, or
Mm.
it wasn't as big. There are bigger losses that other people have had. Um
Animals play such a significant part in people's lives. We have three cats,
mhm,
and these cats are the sanity for my husband.
mm.
One of them sleeps nestled under his arm with his face against his face.
Oh my god.
This cat knows that whenever my husband is feeling upset or anxious, he will come and claw his pant leg until he sits down and the cat can get on his lap. So there is a connection with pets that you
Mhm,
cannot explain.
mhm,
They, and you had a lot of time with Mocha,
mhm,
and you had to make the decision.
mhm. Yeah,
So you also watched him as he was progressively losing it.
yeah,
And so you did have more experience. And with the miscarriage, there was nothing, it was all beyond your control.
totally. Yes.
So it was a very sad and devastating thing to happen. And you're allowed to feel bad about both in different ways. And you don't
Yeah,
have to feel that you have to downplay Mocha at all.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I think this is actually a perfect segue for questions. I've been asking you questions, but questions from other people. So I have on my Instagram, some of you listening are in this. I have a broadcast channel where our guests from past episodes can come in and share more info about the topic. And so I decided to poll everybody in there and say, hey, I'm about to speak to someone about grief. If you could ask someone who has a little bit more of an expertise around grief, what would you ask them? And so I got some listener questions that I thought I would run by you. How does that sound, Maryann?
Okay.
It's not a quiz, don't worry. You're gonna do great. You're gonna get an A plus, I know it. So the first question is how do or why excuse me, why does grief come and go? I feel like I'm getting a tidal wave of grief at random.
Well, um, the feelings do ebb and flow.
Mhm.
And I think if you're just talking about one specific incident, the waves generally subside. But when you come upon holidays or some sort of anniversary, or you see a special place, anything might trigger an emotion related to that particular person. There also might be, well, similar to what you said, Kylie, about having a couple of grief episodes, and then your grandmother, and then any of Omar's family, and so you have different grief experiences, and you're going to feel things a little bit differently.
Mhm.
But I'm going to assume that this question is related to just one particular incident,
Mhm.
and the fact that grief does ebb and flow. It's a natural thing, that there's probably something that triggers it. And if you don't release the stuff, it's going to come back bigger. So that is possible as well. In the beginning, it can feel like a tsunami,
Mhm.
and you wonder if you'll ever find the ground, you find your breath. And then as the water or the waves recede a bit, you get your feet on the ground, you can breathe, and you start walking slowly. You'll still get hit, but your feet are more firmly on the ground. So it's when you find some of those things come back, or you feel hit by a wave, listen to what your body is telling you. If you need to take a nap, if you need to journal, if you need to go for a walk, help yourself in those ways. So it's just that's where in fact, with my clients, I suggest that they every day sit down and say, how am I feeling today and
Mm.
why? Write for
Mhm.
5 to 10 minutes. And then just you get more in touch with your feelings and more aware of when things start improving as well.
What about, and now I'm just tag teaming onto this question someone asked, what if someone doesn't know why they're feeling the way they feel? Like, I feel sad today and I don't know why.
Well, you can start stream of consciousness writing, just
Mm.
you can say grumpy, pissy, um, the food prices, gas prices, crummy landlord, loud
Mhm.
neighbors, you
Mhm.
know, and whatever it is that comes out. So I think if you just get started,
Mhm.
but I don't know what to write. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why. But maybe it has to do with blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. But if you set the timer and just write without thinking,
Mhm.
I think that people try to censor themselves. Oh, it can't be that. That's so petty. But the littlest thing could piss you off grandly.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's find a way to, an uncensored way to express
Yeah.
what you're going through, and then it'll help you navigate it, make some
Yeah.
sense of what you're feeling. Yeah.
And it's for your eyes only. It's
Yeah.
just you're not going to turn it into your teacher.
Right. There's no grading on that.
No,
Thank God.
no, nothing. Not at
Thank
all.
God. I do that in my journal, and I would not like anybody to read that. So,
Mm.
I get that. Okay, next question. How do you come to terms with knowing you likely saw someone important for the last time?
Mm. I think, first of all, find a way to feel the gratitude for that. Still vividly remember seeing my father before he died. I went home, he had cancer. And my parents, my mom still lives in Pennsylvania, but I went to spend a week with them just to have that time. And I had an early flight. My dad made the effort to get up, to have his robe on, to be standing at the counter, smiling, to say goodbye at 5 o'clock in the morning,
Mm.
even though he was in pain. So that is how I will always remember him. Remember the things that you're grateful for about all the time you had with them. And know that no one can ever take that away from you. That will always be with you in your heart, in your mind. And figure out if there's a way you want to honor that. I mean, that's part of the reason I do the work that I do, is to honor the memory of my first husband, Bob. That his death was not in vain.
Mm.
I would not be the woman I am if it were not for that. I'd probably be living in Pennsylvania with 6 kids, a grandmother 3 times over,
Mhm.
making quilts. And it's not a bad life.
No, no, I was gonna say that sounds kinda nice.
It's a far cry from what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with me, Marianne. There's so much more we could talk about here. This is one of those topics that you really can't exhaust it.
Mhm.
Um, and so for those listening who want to keep the conversation going, where can they go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, my website is yourshelteringtree.com. There's Instagram, Your Sheltering Tree is my handle. On Facebook, you can find me at Maryann Roses Udel. And I have a freebie if you want to get that. It's 4 steps to navigate change.
Mm.
And then you'll be on my email list and hear from me on a regular basis.
I'll put the link to that free resource, 4 Steps to Navigate Change, in the show notes here, for anybody who wants to find that.
Mhm.
Marianne, thank you so much for joining me and chatting with me today. I found it very helpful, and I'm positive everyone listening did too. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kylie. It was a joy.
Marianne is just a gem. I so appreciate her coming on to share with us today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Share this episode with a friend who you think could really use some tools on navigating grief. I found it so wildly helpful, and I hope that you did too. If you haven't already, please rate and review this podcast. It makes it really helpful for others to find this podcast and help them too. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time on How We Belong.